Well, hello people, and welcome back to part 2 of our Cities Skylines Early Access series, New Frenwood. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today we're allowed another 30-minute session and to take you up to and including the 8th milestone. So that's what we'll do today, bring in a bit more medium density and really expand the town of New Frenwood. So picking up from where we left off a couple of weeks ago, I really wanted to start bringing in some of the themes that we're all so familiar with from Cities 1. At least on this channel, things of layering, factoring in those differences of height to really kind of, just add a bit more design to the build. And of course with Cities 2's lack of detailing, I feel like this is now more important than it's ever been. So you'll see here that we're playing a lot with these new kind of road keys, if you like. Now I'm really missing the key walls. Obviously they're not in Cities 2, that has been confirmed now. But I am very much enjoying these new little road keys that we've been playing with here to add retaining walls in that really help kind of accentuate these differences in height that we talked about. And we'll also do a bit of terraforming here as well, planning in some networks on this lower level so we can have some offices against the waterfront. And we'll also do some nice things with elevated pathways, and it's really interesting actually how those elevated pathways actually snap into the road keys. Now you'll see an example of it a little bit later on in the video. But working with these little retaining wall roads, if you like, not quite sure what we're calling them yet, they're either road keys or retaining wall roads. I found that playing on either 1.25 or 2.5 meter elevations is the best way to get them in. And when we do actually put them against the water, a kind of good rule of practice with them is to actually terraform out a very flat layer of land under the water first. It just gets them to sit a lot easier. You'll see here, it's giving me errors like not in the water, and it's just being a pain, but then you terraform it out and then it just tends to work a little bit more seamlessly for getting those keys in. It's just more examples of how flexible these new road tools are. Really championed it last episode how much fun they are to play with and what a massive improvement the road tools are from vanilla CS1. And hopefully you can see that in the gameplay. Really looking forward to seeing what you guys think of them when you get your hands on CS2. And speaking of, the embargo for our content actually lifts on the 19th of October. Is when we can start putting out whatever CS2 content we like, so hopefully you're all looking forward to that, and let me know if you'd like any specific CS2 videos down below as well. So we're going to start playing with some terraforming here, pushing in the land so we kind of make a little, I guess a mini harbour here. It's obviously a non-functional harbour because I'm not playing with any kind of ships or marina assets in CS2 just yet. But bringing a bridge across this little port here turns into a really nice design, lining up with the road guidelines. Bringing into all these new elevated keys, and it's all just pretty seamless, isn't it? You'll be noticing you're not getting more of that "you cannot place this here" error message. I think definitely the road tools have been probably the biggest improvement to CS2 from Cities 1. Real big fan of them. We're just keeping that terraforming work going. Really important now as well, I think, because you have to design the roads so much more to get the city to look good, and it's kind of really forces you into being creative with the CS2 vanilla mechanics. Terraforming before you start building is now really important in my opinion, especially for road networking. Makes a huge difference to the final product if you kind of work with the land before you even start putting any roads or zones down. So really important for me that we terraform before we build in CS2. A little bit of a criticism about the bridges, they do look a little bit paper thin. I feel like I could do with a bit more girth to them, if you know what I mean. And then we're going to get our first office zonings in here as well. Which look pretty cute, bit of trees around here as well, and you'll see us in a second start putting this elevated pathway in. And it does snap to those kind of key roads at the top. You'll notice, we'll see someone actually walk up it in a second as well. They just seamlessly snap in and you can connect onto them. Again, just really cool about how amazing the new networks are. It's going to be really fun to see how creative we can get with this new functionality in the game once we've spent a bit more time with CS2, isn't it? All the different possibilities that are now available just because of these little quality of life changes. Really interesting and fun little builds to be had, I think. You'll also see some people walking. There is a bit of a glitch at the minute as well where the barrier doesn't disappear. Hopefully that's changed on release. But we're going to carry on terraforming the waterfront here. This river in Mountain Village actually flows downhill, which makes it significantly harder to terraform because you've got to keep changing your layers and then resloping. And then softening so you can see where my level terrain starts to rise out of the water as the river goes downhill. So a real challenging terrain to work with on this map, probably the most mountainous map I think from the vanilla CS2 ones. So it's good to start with the hardest, isn't it? It's going to make us get used to it very quickly. We've also asked our patrons some more questions as well, so we'll cover these while they're kind of relevant to the gameplay. Ben asked, how does the road customization and building feel? They were just a lot more fluid. It still takes some while to get used to how you customize the roads now. For example, if you want bus lines on or tree lining or grass lining, you have to upgrade your kind of base template road with it. The more we play with it, the more I'm getting used to it, and I can kind of see how flexible it's going to make our roads now, rather than having 20 different types of road assets. It's going to be interesting to see how the road assets appear on the workshop when they, of course, inevitably do. And Brassack asks as well, is there anything that's changed between the first builds and this one? Yes, there is. The game is slightly more optimized now, runs a little bit smoother, and you'll also notice the addition of contour lines, which is a major improvement. Really weird that they were removed from Cities 1, but they are back now, so contour lines are confirmed for the release of CS2, thank God, because they are very important for building. But our roads will continue across here now. We're bringing in another big elevation using one of these fancy new bridges for the first time, which I absolutely love. Much bigger and kind of dramatic bridges, aren't they, than compared to CS1. And one of the biggest improvements here is this gradient tool that's now embedded into the road tool, so you can see exactly how much your road is rising or falling based on the angle. Amazing. Like, really good for getting that big bridge to span the river and make sure that it's perfectly level. That was such a pain in the ass in Cities 1, so nice to see that bit of sort of precision engineering, if you like, carried over. So what you're seeing now is actually my first attempt at a highway interchange. We're going to build the classic kind of noob yoke one, if you like, without the roundabouts on the end of it. But really fun, again, playing with the highway roads for the first time. In my experience, definitely upgrading the highway to 3-lane first and then adding the slip lanes on seems to be the way to go about it. So it's all kind of level and symmetrical. There's one thing that I have fed back to Colossal Order the more I've played, is that I'm really missing the option of having a road length snap in the road tools. It's just nice for getting things perfectly mirrored and all the same length, and when you don't have it anymore because you can't snap to your road length anymore, you really miss it. So I've fed back that to Colossal Order, perhaps suggested because now roads are measured in meters, maybe we could snap to 5 or 10 meter increments would make it easier for creating sort of mirrored and properly parallel networks, I think. But really nice design here. Bringing a bridge over, which you can see has got a little bit of that retaining wall key on it as well as it rises off the ground, which is really nice to see. It's kind of, proper retaining wall keys, kind of similar things we did in Ilos for those that have watched that series. So we're also playing with some asymmetrical roads for the first time here as well, and I think by the time this interchange is done, it's certainly a lot better than the first interchange that I built in Cities 1, so it's nice to see some of those skills transferring over, because let me tell you, when I first picked up Cities 2, I was like, what the hell is this game? I was like, all my Cities 1 knowledge disappeared. I had no idea what an interchange was, what a roundabout was. Honestly, it's like a very jarring experience to move from Cities 1. I'd lost all my knowledge. It was a very strange experience. The more I play with bush lining, the more I resent the fact that a prop line tool has not been brought into the game engine. It's something myself and many other creators have fed back to Colossal Order, that we must have a prop line tool for drawing in bushes and trees. It's really needed, and I imagine it's going to be one of the first mods on the workshop as well. But we added in some highway sound barriers there for a bit of detailing, some bushes as well, turned into a pretty cute interchange. You'll also see how we turned this main arterial road here into a grass and tree lined one, just by upgrading it with those options. We're also throwing on a expansion on our med clinic as well, which just increases its capacity and satisfying some of these more medium density demands as well. I've still yet to figure out how to use low rent housing, and every time I place it, it seems to abandon, even in low land value areas, and I know that other creators have also posted in the server that we're in kind of experiencing similar issues. So whether or not that's just a beta bug or none of us have actually figured out how to use low rent housing yet, I'm not sure. We're going to bring this dirt road across, which is actually a placeholder for a railway. We get involved in buses and trains this episode, really bringing in our first proper public transport infrastructure and developing a bus and train transport hub, which turned out really nicely, playing with some nice geometric road shapes too, with kind of curves and symmetrical mirrored pathways again. Got time for another Patreon question here as well, where BakeZ asks, is it hard to basically stick to the OE style now with everything seeming so much more modular? It definitely feels like a different gameplay style for what I'm used to in Cities 1, but you've really got to factor in the planning first of all. I think that's much more important now. You're relying on the roads to beautify the city quite a lot more, I think, and the network planning and the designs. It feels a lot more crucial than it does in Cities 1 because you can't back it up with, you know, fully grown trees and bush linings and props and dirt pathways and stuff. None of that's really available anymore. Yes, it does feel different, but I wouldn't necessarily say it in a bad way. We're coming some more network expansion here, again really factoring in the layers. Next episode we're going to get involved in high density stuff, skyscrapers and whatnot, and I really want to prepare that space here. We're going to be doing some serious layering here with those road keys again, and the same thing as well we'll do on the other side of the river next episode, and play with a lot of our towers here. So you can see what I mean by, you know, factoring in the network designs a lot more into beautifying and designing your city to get Cities 2 to look good. I think if you don't end up doing this, like seriously planning out roads and whatnot, you'll end up suffering just because of the way the game plays now. Again, whether or not that's a good or a bad thing, I think it just depends on your gameplay style. Some will really enjoy it, some will get used to it, and I think some just generally won't ever enjoy it. But, you know, everyone's got a different preference, haven't they? So more landscaping here again to prepare what will eventually become a low density suburb, just to keep that demand coming in. And you can get kind of a sense of how these layers are beginning to develop now with these road keys. So again, they're pretty easy to do. You want to make sure you're terraforming out those layers first, like we mentioned. Like I said, you know, you've got to terraform first. It's really important now for planning and making things look good. Bringing out some more arterial roads now, just continuing that road hierarchy on to keep everyone linked in and flowing around. And I think, again, once I get pathways linked back to the opposite side of the river from here, once, you know, the high rises of downtown Frenwood exist next episode, I'm going to really enjoy it, because you know, we all know how much I love a layer, and layering's so much easier now because of the new road tools. So I think that's something that Cities 2 should be commended for. I know it's had quite a bit of flack since it was kind of announced, because you know things have been taken away and some decisions don't quite make sense to a lot of us that have played a lot of CS1. But yeah, we're going to open up our tiles here now as well, because we're going to start doing some train lines. So I didn't want the train line to run on the outside of the town. I actually wanted it to come through the middle, and I'm actually inspired here by a network from Revo on the workshop from the Railway 2 package, which is actually a train flowing down the street, very American. But that's what I wanted to do, so I decided to bring the train line through my couplet system that goes through the middle of the town, and then we're going to feed it into the railroad or the rail yard building here as well, which is what you need to place to get trains to move around, at least internally anyway. But, you know, much chunkier, bigger, sexier assets, if you like. I feel like a train yard like this was really missing from Cities 1, especially vanilla. We all know how much we love a train yard in our modded builds, so nice to see that that functionality is now in vanilla CS2. And maybe, you know, we can start combining these to make larger train yards one day. I'm sure the possibilities are there again once we've got a bit more experience with the game. But you know, bringing this train line right through the middle of the couplet system now, it's more examples of how flexible the new network tools are. You'll see how crazy some of these rail crossing junctions get. Things that would have been totally impossible in vanilla CS1. So big testament to the game here, I think, as to how its network tools have improved. We're going to bring it through here as well so it can carry on up to that train line / dirt road that I prepared a little bit earlier in the video. This is where I want this train line to flow to. And it ends up looking really good. You'll see some shots of trains passing through the town here in a second, and it was my first kind of moment of looking at CS2 and thinking, yes please. Really enjoyed watching these trains pass through, and cargo as well. I absolutely love the new cargo trains, they're very, very nice. Yeah, just super cool, isn't it? Like, passing by the park, it's just, yeah, like, this is the first time I properly smiled and beamed at a CS2 design. Something I was very happy with, having the trains flow in between the couplet system. Just really, really cool. We also unlocked the milestone during that train time lapse that gives us access to the communications tab, including post and Wi-Fi. So I decided to bring off a little dirt pathway, or dirt road, into the park, and actually place in the radio mast antenna here, and also immediately upgraded it with both of its upgrade options as well, because it just increases the capacity and the range of it. And it's pretty cheap, so I didn't really see a reason not to upgrade it, because Wi-Fi does make people very happy in CS2. So definitely something you want to get in nice and early, I think, once you've unlocked it. Coming back to our trains now, we start bringing in the cargo train terminal, and I'm going to finagle this a little bit as well because I want to make sure I can get the small warehouse upgrade onto the side of it, which is really important, I think, because when you're placing these assets now, you want to make sure you save enough room for future upgrades. Again, but just make sure you've got to plan things in a bit more effectively. So you now have to draw in your intercity cargo connections, which is something I'd really like. It gives you much more control over where all those connections are going to go. So that's what we're doing here. We just connect in our train lines to the national line via the rail yard. So we draw in the cargo line from the cargo terminal to the edge of the map. And now we have a cargo railway route. Really cool. See the train arrive into the facility, and really big chunky assets happening here. There's time for another Patreon question here from Bare Necessities, who asks, does the scale of everything feel better than it does in CS1? And yes, it does. I'm a big fan of how much chunkier everything feels. Like that cargo train terminals covered in shipping containers and other general industrial spices. It's a shame we can't place those containers ourselves. That would have been amazing and exactly what I wanted. But yes, everything does feel much more realistically scaled and bigger and true to real life, not kind of small and tiny anymore. I also grabbed the post sorting facility here, and again, I mentioned last episode how important orientation and the design and combination of assets is now. Again, just due to that lack of detailing, and decided to position my post sorting facility against my cargo train terminal to create this big industrial hub of sorting and organising and shipping containers and just general heavy industry spice, and it ended up turning out really nicely. I'm a big fan of the way this area looks. You'll see a few still shots of it throughout the rest of the video. But to answer Bare Necessity's question again, yes, everything here feels much more realistically scaled. Compare these two assets to their CS1 counterparts, and hopefully you'll get a bit more sense of how they do feel together. Post now also requires you to place mailboxes around the city, which is pretty cute. You'll see I'm just spamming some down here. It gives me XP and citizen happiness, so no reason not to do them. And get the post service going in the city, and again just adjusting its service cost, because when you put it down you're paying too much for it until you need that capacity. Also zoned up our first mixed use here as well, which we'll have a little look at later on in the video, but we will return to our public transport. So we also had another question from Ben about how does line creation feel. So what we're doing here is we're actually placing in the bus stops first of all, and then you need to go back afterwards and place in the bus line. Didn't like it at first, admittedly. I kind of felt like it's just public transport with extra steps, but it is cool. I do actually like it because it gives you much more customization as to where the bus goes, and yeah, I do like it now. It does definitely feel different to Cities 1 public transport, and I also feel like there's not as much demand for public transport either. Like I've waited quite a while to get any sort of public transport in here, and yeah, I feel like you need to get to much higher populations before public transport really becomes a serious need. You'll also notice here that buses, they won't stop at a bus stop unless there's someone waiting to get on or off, which is a really cool little quality of life improvement. You'll see buses just drive straight past the stop there because no one wants to get on, which is totally true to real life. And then we're going to do a bit more specialised industry here as well. I decided to move my stone farm from last time, or stone quarry rather, not stone farm, and then just have it up on the hillside here where we get one of those teeth excavators that does not like to be terraformed. So it sits on a disc, end up having to redraw it. But yeah, trying to give a bit more theme and purpose to these specialised industries, because I mentioned last episode that they've certainly regressed the most, so you need to give them proper attention and put them in the right places really to get them to fit in. But we do have the teeth excavator now mining stone for us, which is pretty cool. But with a nice industrial aesthetic. We'll also do a bit more specialised industry here with forestry, which I am sad to say is possibly the worst of the specialised industries now. Again, it's really cool, functions the same, you draw out that harvest area for it. You're going to see the forestry main building. Like, this is now forestry in Cities 2. Pretty crap, in my opinion. Like, that's it. That's your forestry area. It's just a couple of little huts. I live near a big forestry commission, and again, similar to the livestock farms, they don't look like that, but you know, whatever. We'll have a look at our mixed use here again now, so you can see how many people are living here, what it's selling, and they're big thick assets. They're very chunky, This block here, you can see the blue zoning is all mixed use zoning, and it's really cool to have it in. Sorely missing from CS1, I felt. So nice to have it in. It's a big medium density solution, and it is satisfied by a medium density as well. It's not high density. We also run into a very greasy looking bear out in the wilds here. There's also a few more later on in the video, but it does look like he's been oiled up by someone or something. But it is still pretty cute to see wildlife walking around in CS2, something I've really enjoyed in CS1, especially the carnivorous deer of Orchid Bay. We're going back now to just zoning up a bit more mixed use, ready for it all to come in. We're also going to grab some of our large sports parks as well, which is where you get soccer fields and American football fields, and a community pool comes into it as well, which we're actually going to place at our train station now as well once we get all this network stuff aligned. So with the train stations, they're much more realistic. I think my only criticism of them being is that they're pretty big. I feel like we could just do with a single track train station. The base game vanilla one is only, well, not only, it has 3 tracks on it, which is cool. It's nice to have that, you know, options to expand the networks, but it's pretty big, and it'd be nice to have a smaller version, but I'm guessing a content creator pack at some point, or the workshop will provide that for us. We've got time for another patron question here, and Scartha asks, is there going to be any unique factories, and what will they put in the factories? There is no factories in the game in terms of what you're thinking of from the Industries DLC from Cities 1, like Furniture Factory or Car Factory or Petroleum Refinery. None of those sorts of buildings are in the game. The only factories you're going to get are with your zoned generic industry. So no to that one, unfortunately, but I'd probably expect something similar to arrive with an Industries themed DLC for Cities 2 at some point. So bringing our pathways across here again, and this is where I begin to lose patience with the bush detailing. It's super tedious without a prop line tool. Again, I've mentioned it a couple of episodes, but I'll mention it again while we're on the topic. One of my biggest disappointments about the game is that it doesn't have a prop line tool embedded in its engine. Will be the first mod I download for sure. We're bringing out some of our rail networks here, bringing it over this arterial road again, factoring in layers of height into the builds. Now it's really important, adds a lot more interest into the build in my opinion. We'll also wrap up this key wall here as well with the road, completing the road hierarchy against this front, and we'll definitely do a nice park space down at the bottom of the key there, down onto the next layer, with maybe some occasional bit of zoning, but don't want to zone up on that bottom layer. I think it'd be cool to have a nice green belt space there by the river. We're also going to bring out our train bridge again, which hopefully the train police now, I won't trigger them anymore because of this new angle gradient tool that's embedded into the road tools. Again, super helpful being able to see how much your network is rising or falling with that new network gradient. Super cool feature, can't hammer home that one enough. Really enjoy getting to play with that. There's one thing I love about CS2 is that trains now unlock so much earlier. That was one of my biggest criticisms about CS1, is that airport areas actually unlocked before trains in the milestone progression. So just having the new development tree now, that's something I've really enjoyed playing CS2 for the, I'm not sure, maybe 65 hours we've got in it now at this point during the gameplay. Just having trains early and being able to factor trains into the early town planning is just so much better than it was in CS1, a much more realistic progression system I think this time around, which is something I think you guys are going to enjoy. So we throw in a football field here and a community pool, which are 2 of our larger parks that we unlocked within the development tree. Bringing pathways across again, and we're going to throw down a bus stop over here as well in a second. You see that reflection in the pool as well. It's nice to have proper reflections in the game now. Of course, they were kind of just a stock image, weren't they, in the reflection in CS1, if you remember those. But this is the new bus terminal. Really nice asset. You can see how every road on the asset must be connected, which is why I bring in this little alleyway here against the road to create that nice little kind of triangle design. That turned out really nicely, I think. Spreading out some more networks as well now, so we can hook into both directions of an intercity line. And very similar with the cargo connections, you now need to paint in or draw in your own intercity lines or trains, which is vastly better in my opinion than just having to rely on turning off the station. You've now got much more control over where those intercity lines go and what stations they arrive at compared to CS1. So big fan of that, and you'll see some trains arriving at a very rainy station here again too. And the train models, just absolutely beautiful. The train station itself is much nicer, a lot less cartoony than it is in CS1, as you can see here. A few people getting off there. We actually unlock the college now as well. It's time to get that next level of education in after high school, and I wanted to kind of treat this as a bit of a centerpiece against this kind of mall design that was centered on the train station. So you walk out of the train station, and again really factoring in sight lines, which is something I always enjoy kind of developing in Cities Skylines, I think, and I definitely want to bring that into CS2 as well. So having this big mall here, and I lose patience so quickly trying to bushline a pathway. It's so tedious. At this point in Cities 2's build, my biggest request is now a prop line tool. It's even like my first go-to quality life mod in Cities 1. It's really good that they've added the brush function in, but just super fingers crossed. Please everyone ask Colossal Order for a line tool. Believe me, you guys are going to want it. You'll notice here as well that we get crime scene, and the robber is actually stood outside of the house as the police arrive. The child bro walks down the driveway, walks away, and then the police leave, the bus can't get past, and then the robber applauds himself after he evades capture at the crime scene. Very unusual, I don't know what happened there. A little car crash here where the guy gets out the car and then kind of again applauds himself on the side of the street while another pedestrian walks down and comes and gets in her road. It'd be nice if we got a notification before the crash happened, so the guy doesn't need an ambulance, but all of a sudden he decides he does need an ambulance and then vanishes into thin air. Don't know why, but he did. So we now start playing some signature buildings. We drop a couple down in this episode. This is an iron press, so this is a mixed use signature building, so it will function as mixed use zoning, essentially, which is a big improvement from unique buildings in CS1 as to how they work, and we do hit milestone 7 at this point as well. And we also unlocked ore mining with that milestone as well, so plot that in where we also found some more greasy bears. And then we finally arrive at winter for the first time in New Frenwood. Now of course this is a beta build, so expect the graphics to be tweaked, I hope, but it's very weird. Grass, snow doesn't fall everywhere. You'll see little bits of random white grass, or green grass, sorry. There's a very jarring contrast between the two textures, as you can see here. Doesn't fall in the gardens either. And we also struck down the welfare office, which is another nice big important building. Helps the lower income part of the city kind of get on their feet, if you like. Got time for a last Patreon question here as well. Zephyr Blaze asks, what does a house or business abandonment look like? Do people move in, and does it unabandon, if you will? No, you don't. You can see here low rent house has abandoned, but its texture doesn't really change, and it doesn't unabandon. It stays abandoned until you demolish it, at least in my experience anyway. We also upgrade our streets with some bus lanes as well, where our buses are flowing around that we made earlier. And these don't look too bad. They're quite a pinky salmon. I think could do with being a bit more red, but again, just another example of how you upgrade that base road template now, rather than drawing down a bus road, for example. So we return to our high school campus here in this big central park space that we've reserved. I mentioned it last episode as well, but really important to planning these larger park spaces now, just to help with the detailing. I think, well, at least in my experience, I found it important. We're combining American football fields. We chuck in a community pool here as well, plus a couple of tennis courts, all kind of combined with the trees and this kind of geometric path design that we've run with in New Frenwood. And let me know what you guys are thinking of the detailing or lack thereof as well. As you've seen Cities Skylines 2 gameplay recently from the core curators in the community. How are you feeling about the, it's essentially like a props basically, isn't it? It seems to be the biggest issue. But pretty cool here that people will walk off of assets onto our main pathways, which is pretty cool. And then that does bring us up to the 8th milestone, which is where today's video, it has to come to a halt, but it does give us high density. And once we do get some of that demand in, next episode we'll start creating a bit more of a traditional downtown around the river, I imagine. But otherwise guys, that is going to do it for today. Let's thank you all so much for watching. Again, apologies, this feels so rushed. It's a real challenge to work with these 30-minute time limits that Paradox are giving us, and to show you guys as much stuff as possible. But let me know what you think of this kind of early to mid-game city. New Frenwood is certainly growing up now, and we'll finish it off in the third and final part, hopefully soon for you guys, of course. Join our Discord and follow me on Twitter to find out when. Drop your thoughts and feelings down below. Otherwise, I'll shut up and leave it there. Let's thank you all so much for watching, and as always, enjoy the rest of your day.